Have you ever trusted someone so much that you never imagined that person could betray you? And when betrayal comes from the person you love most, the one you placed all your hopes on, what's left? This is not just a story of pain. It's a true story of someone who had her heart broken, her faith shaken, and her life turned upside down, but who discovered that God can transform even the deepest wounds into testimonies of restoration. Many people believe that betrayal only comes from enemies. But what about when it comes within your own home? When does it come from the one who promised to be with you until the end? This story will move you. It will remind you that human beings can fail, but God never abandons his children, even when everything seems lost. His name is Andre. He was an ordinary, hard-working man, someone who believed in love, marriage, family. He wasn't perfect, but he did what he could. He put food on the table, protected his children, and every day he prayed for his home. But not all storms show signs before they arrive. And what he discovered in a simple routine slip changed everything forever. Andre didn't expect that. Nobody waits. He believed in commitment, in fidelity, in care. He trusted so much that he never considered looking around. But it was precisely there, in the place where he felt safest, that he received the hardest blow of his life. Can you imagine what it's like to look into the eyes of someone you love and see that it was all a lie? What is it like to have your soul ripped apart, not only by the pain of betrayal, but by the shattering of everything you believe to be true? It is at this type of moment that many people turn away from God. Ask where he was. Why didn't you stop it? And maybe you who are watching this video have already felt this. Maybe he was betrayed. Maybe right now you're trying to pick up the pieces of a heart that was thrown to the ground. But let me tell you something. This story will show you that when everything breaks, God rebuilds. When everything falls down, he gets up. You need to watch until the end, because what happened next was something no one could have imagined. And maybe it's exactly what you need to hear today. Follow this story and see how God can transform pain into purpose and betrayal into renewal. Before continuing, I need to give you a warning. What you're about to hear isn't just a powerful testimony. It's a sign of the times we're living in. We are surrounded by situations that shake families, destroy relationships, and weaken faith. Betrayal, pain, abandonment are increasingly common. But that's not normal. It's a sign that we are approaching the end of times, as the Bible already warned us. So don't ignore this video. He is not here by chance. If this message reached you, it is because God wants to awaken you, strengthen you, and prepare you for what is to come. And stay connected with content that builds faith, that reveals God's actions, and that brings light in the midst of chaos. It's more than important, it's urgent. Hit the like button right now and subscribe to the channel, not only so you can continue receiving stories like this, but so that this message reaches even more lives that are hurt, lost, and in need of a response. You can be the channel that God will use to transform another story today. And don't forget, at any moment, the next miracle could be yours. Now, get ready, because what Andre experienced after the betrayal will affect you. Andre has always been a simple man, but with solid values. Son of a Christian family, he grew up hearing about faith, commitment, and fidelity. From a young age, he learned that the basis of life was God, and that everything we do should be based on rock, not sand. He took it seriously. He was the type of man who placed his hand on his chest during the national anthem, who got up early to work, and who prayed before meals, even the simplest ones. Married for 10 years, father of 2 children, he felt fulfilled. He wasn't perfect, but he tried every day to be a good husband, a good father, and a man of God. The household's routine was like that of any family that runs between school, work, the supermarket, and Sunday worship. But there was love there. At least that was what Andre believed with all his might. He trusted his wife with his eyes closed. They watched series together, prayed for their children, planned family vacations, and all these things for him were More than moments, they were small proofs that God was taking care of his home. A tireless worker, Andre had sacrificed many personal things to keep the house standing. I spent hours at the office, faced traffic, endured pressure. But when he came home and saw his children's smiles and his wife's hugs, it all seemed worth it. He didn't need luxury. For him, true success was coming home and feeling peace. And he thought he had it. I thought so. Sundays were special. The whole family went to church, sat together in the same pew. The neighbors even commented, "Exemplary family, see, a blessing." And that filled Andre's heart with gratitude. After all, he believed he was living God's promise, a united family, a blessed home. But as the word itself teaches us, not everything that seems firm is actually standing. The appearance often hides cracks that only reveal themselves when a strong wind blows. And that wind was closer than he imagined. It all started with almost imperceptible details, a subtle change in the wife's gaze. That ringtone on the cell phone that was previously spontaneous now seemed hidden. A different silence during dinner, but Andre didn't suspect it. Because when we truly love, we prefer to believe in the best. He attributed it all to tiredness, to stress. After all, who has never gone through difficult stages in their marriage? But there was something behind it, something that, even in silence, was screaming. It was on an ordinary day after arriving, home early from work, that Andre realized that the cracks were deeper than he wanted to admit. The wife was strange, nervous. The cell phone, always close by, was now locked with a password. Andre's heart sank, but he tried to ignore it. But the Holy Spirit does not leave the truth hidden for long, and something inside him said, something is wrong. Maybe you, who are watching now, have already felt this. That feeling in your chest, that restlessness that seems to come from nowhere, but is actually God trying to open your eyes. Andre didn't want to believe it, but the truth has the power to find us, even when we try to run away from it. On an impulse, or perhaps guided by something greater, he took her cell phone while she was taking a shower, heart racing, hands shaking. He entered his children's birthdays, tried the house number, and on the third attempt, the device unlocked. It was as if time had stopped. Within seconds, he accessed something that would destroy everything. He knew as reality: messages, photos, deleted calls, conversations with someone he knew, someone close, a childhood friend, someone who frequented his house, who had prayed alongside him, and there, in that moment, everything fell apart. What was once love became shock. What was peace became a silent scream. The betrayal wasn't just from his wife, it was from the trust, the history, the faith that he had built with so much effort. And this is where I need to ask, have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet? Have you ever trusted someone so much that when the truth came out you could barely breathe? Write here in the comments, "I've felt this pain," if it touched any part of your story. Maybe your outburst is exactly what will heal someone else who is also watching. Here, on this channel, we are not just telling stories. We are building a space of healing, faith, and renewal. Your every comment can be a seed that God will use to reach another life. And please don't let this message stop you. Like this video now and subscribe to the channel. It's not just a button, it's an act of faith. It's a way of saying, I want to keep hearing what God has done. This is how this message goes further. This is how we overcome this system that only spreads pain and begin to spread testimonies of miracles, transformation, and restoration. Because what happened to Andre after that goes beyond what anyone could imagine. And that's exactly what you'll see next. What happened on that ordinary night wasn't just a breach of trust, it was an implosion of the soul. Andre arrived home earlier than usual. It had been an exhausting day at work, and all he wanted was to take a shower, have dinner with his family and rest. But when he opened the door, he felt a different atmosphere. It was as if the air was heavier, the environment colder. His wife seemed surprised by his arrival. She tried to smile, but her eyes gave away. Something she couldn't hide. Andre tried to ignore it. He sat on the sofa, turned on the TV, pretended to be normal. But inside, something was no longer right. The Holy Spirit whispered, and his heart beat loudly as if warning, "You're about to discover something that will change everything." When she went to the bathroom, he saw her cell phone on the table. Without thinking much, he picked up the device, tried to unlock, tried again. And on the third try, the screen lit up. It was as if God said, "You need to see it." And what he saw was something no heart is ready to bear. It wasn't just an innocent conversation. They were intimate words, complicit laughter, photos that spoke more than 1,000 texts, all with someone he had known since childhood. A friend, a walking brother, someone who prayed with him, who attended the same church, who ate dinner at his table. The betrayal was not just marital, it was spiritual, emotional, fraternal. It was complete. At that moment, Andre's world collapsed. He didn't scream, didn't confront. Nothing broke. He just felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. His hands began to shake. His face turned pale. The heartbeat accelerated uncontrollably. It was as if the heart was screaming for help. He left the room without making a sound, went to the bedroom and locked the door. He sat on the edge of the bed and cried, but it wasn't an ordinary cry. It was a deep lament, a cry that only those who have been betrayed by the person they love most can understand. Do you know what that's like? Have you ever felt this type of pain? Comment below with the phrase, "I know how it hurts," if this story touched you. You are not alone, and sharing your experience could be exactly what opens a door of healing for someone watching right now. That night, Andre didn't sleep. I relived every moment of the last few months, every hug, every family prayer, every dinner at which the friend was present. It all seemed like a farce. And the worst part, he started to doubt himself. Have I failed as a husband? Have I not been enough? Has God abandoned me? These questions are normal at times like this, but the problem is when they turn into beliefs. And that's exactly what started to happen. Andre, a man of faith, began to move away from God, not out of rebellion, but out of pain. He didn't understand how the Lord allowed that to happen. So me, that I was always faithful, that I fought to keep my home, that I never turned my back on my family, he felt betrayed by God. And this, perhaps, is the most difficult wound to heal, because when we are hurt by people, we still have somewhere to take refuge. But when we think that it was God who allowed the coup, it seems that there is no shelter left. Days passed, and Andre closed himself off. He stopped praying. He stopped going to church. He moved away from his children. I just did the basics. He went to work, came home, and locked himself away. His soul was in pieces, and each piece cut deeper than the other. He looked in the mirror and no longer recognized himself. The joy was gone. The light in the eyes turned off. The man who once inspired others now just wanted to disappear. And you know what's cruelest? Nobody noticed. Because often, the deepest suffering is the one we carry in silence. And maybe you're going through this right now. An invisible mourning, a wound that no one sees, but that bleeds inside every day. Let me tell you something. God is watching. Even when everything seems dark, even when silence screams louder than any words, the Lord is still there. He knows every tear, every hidden thought, every prayer made in whispers, or even those that we can no longer say. But Andre still couldn't see that. All he saw was pain. The nights turned into sleepless dawns. The pillow became a confidant of tears. He got to the point where he thought about giving up, not just about marriage, but about life itself. Yes, he thought about disappearing. Disappearing, because I no longer saw any sense. It was at this point that something began to change. One detail, a breath, a spark of faith that still resisted within him. He no longer knew what it was to live. He just survived. Andre's days became a burden, a sequence of dragging hours where time seemed to mock his pain. I would wake up, if I actually slept, with my eyes swollen and my heart in ruins. Breakfast was ignored, lunch was tasteless, and at night, all that was left was an emptiness that swallowed him from the inside. There was no longer any desire for anything. There was no more color in things. The house, which was once full of laughter, now felt like a tomb, and inside him, a deafening silence. He was trying not to think, but everything kept bringing him back to the same image. The messages, the secret smiles, the betrayal. That scene stuck in his mind like an open wound that wouldn't heal. And every thought was like salt thrown at her. I slept little. I ate. Almost nothing. Think then? Almost impossible. Andre's mind was collapsing. It was as if I were in a dark room with no windows, no doors, no way out. Within days, he became a shadow of the man he once was. Friends began to notice his withdrawal, but he avoided any contact. He locked himself up, hid, sank. He refused invitations. I ignored messages. Even her children, who had once been her greatest joy, were now painful reminders of what had been destroyed. He couldn't look at them without feeling like he failed. Who allowed that pain to enter the house? That he wasn't enough, and when human pain reaches this point, the natural thing is to try to find someone to blame. And that's when Andre started to blame God. At first, he just asked, "Why, God?" Then he went on to declare, "The Lord has abandoned me." Until one day, in a moment of pure despair, he said out loud, alone in his room, "The Lord betrayed me." Saying that was like pouring gasoline on your own heart. The faith that once sustained everything now seemed distant, broken, unrecognizable. Andre, who once preached about hope, now doubted even the existence of a purpose. And the Bible, oh, the Bible. It was there at the headboard, but it was no longer open. Not because he didn't believe, but because it hurt too much to see words of promise while his heart was shattered. It's strong, I know. And maybe you who are listening to me now have felt this way too. Have you ever wondered if it's worth praying? Have you ever doubted whether God is listening? If this has ever crossed your mind, comment here. I've already questioned God. It's not weakness to admit it. It's human. And sometimes recognizing that we are hurt is the first step for God to heal us. Andre stopped going to church. He stopped hearing praise. When someone talked about miracle or faith, he looked away, because for him, all that now seemed distant. How can we trust a God who allowed his heart to be torn apart? How to believe that there was a purpose in betrayal? The only thing he felt was emptiness, an abyss, and it felt like he was falling deeper and deeper, unable to hold on to anything. Desperation became routine. Andre no longer cried, because even his tears had dried. It was as if his soul was numb, a state of spiritual dormancy. He did not rebel with violence, but inside, his heart screamed. And that scream echoed inside him like a desperate prayer, even without words. One day, he went out for a walk, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to get out of that dark room. He walked aimlessly through the streets, with the hood on his head, his gaze lost, his steps dragging. Every person that passed by him seemed too happy, too alive, while he felt dead inside. His eyes were watering, but he held on. I didn't want to appear weak, but inside him, everything had already broken. He passed in front of a church, the same one I've been going to for years. The doors were open, the light was on, the praise echoed softly through the windows. But he kept walking. He didn't feel worthy of entering. I didn't believe there would be anything there for him. The pain spoke louder than any memory of faith, and even God seemed too far away to hear. Those were days like that. Days when getting out of bed was a struggle, in which the simple act of breathing seemed to require strength that he no longer had. And yet something inside insisted on not dying. A small flame, hidden among the rubble of the soul, insisted on not going out. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. And it was this small flame that, even in the midst of pain, kept Andre alive. Because even when he thought it was all over, even when he no longer felt faith, God was still writing. And the most incredible thing is that even when we move away, he remains close. Even when we don't understand, he continues to act, because the Lord doesn't need our strength to perform the miracle. He just needs space, with a sincere heart, even if it is in pieces. And Andre didn't know it yet, but that rock bottom wasn't the end. It was the exact point where God would begin to lift him up. And it's exactly at that moment, when everything seems over, that something starts to move. But before continuing, tell me, have you ever had the feeling of being at rock bottom, but with a glimmer of hope burning deep inside? Share here in the comments, because sometimes your story intersects with that of someone who is still trying to find a way out. That night was different, not because something good had happened, but because the tiredness of the soul reached an unbearable level. Andre's body no longer responded. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, he didn't get angry. It was as if he was emptied of everything. His mind was spinning in circles, his chest was tight, and the feeling was that even God had forgotten him. The dark room seemed to be an exact reflection of what he felt inside. A place without light, without life, without answers. There was only silence, but it was exactly there, in that silence, that something began to change. It was dawn, 3 in the morning. Everyone slept, and he once again was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at the floor with empty eyes and a destroyed heart. The memories came in waves. The altar where he made his vows, the day he held his children in his arms for the first time, the family lunches, and the image of betrayal, like a wound that refused to heal. It was then that for the first time in weeks, he looked up, not with nice words, not with a rehearsed speech, just a look from someone who had nothing left. And when he realized it, he was already on his knees, right there, in the corner of the room. The cold floor beneath her knees didn't matter. The pain was greater. Andre did not cry out for justice. He didn't ask God to make his wife suffer. He didn't want the other man to pay for what he did. At that moment, what he wanted was peace. Just peace, a rest for the soul, a hope that there was still reason to continue. The prayer was simple, raw, sore, but true. He said, "Lord, I don't have the strength. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm lost. I'm broken. But if there's still something from the Lord for me, show me, hold me, heal me." And then silence. But it was a different silence. Not that silence that hurts, not that oppressive emptiness he had been facing. It was an embracing silence that calmed down, which filled. Andre did not hear an audible voice. No prophecies fell from the ceiling. No supernatural visions. But he felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A slight heat in the chest. A subtle but unmistakable feeling that he was no longer alone in that room. It was as if God himself was there, sitting beside him in silence, crying with him, feeling with him, and even without saying a word, saying everything. That morning, Andre did not receive an instant miracle, but he received what every wounded heart needs most: presence, the certainty that even in the midst of tragedy, God was still there. Not like a judge pointing the finger, but like a father who hugs his son who fell, even if he was dirty, even if he was hurt, even if he didn't understand. It was at that moment that faith, which seemed dead, gave a small sigh, a flash, a spark. He still didn't know what would come next. I didn't have all the answers. But for the first time in a long time, he was able to sleep. And it wasn't just any sleep. It was a rest, as if the soul had received relief. He lay down, closed his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, the pillow was not a place of anguish, but of surrender. The next morning, the sky remained the same. The house, silent. The difficulties were still there, but something inside him had changed. Not completely, but enough for him to take the next step, enough for him to get up again, even if he was staggering. Because sometimes God doesn't start rebuilding with an earthquake. It starts with a whisper, with a touch of the heart, with a peace that the world does not understand. And if you've ever experienced something similar, If you've ever had a night when all you could do was fall to your knees and say, "God, help me," then this part of the story speaks to you. Comment here, "I also knelt down," if you've ever had that moment of surrender. Because when we share our surrender, we remind others that they can surrender too. That was the first dawn in a long time in which Andre didn't feel empty. He still had doubts, I still felt pain, but now there was a difference. He knew he was no longer trying alone. He had opened space for God to begin to act. And that's exactly what makes all the difference. It's not about having all the answers. It's not about understanding the why of everything. It's about recognizing that, even without understanding, you can trust, you can rest, you can put the burden in God's hands and simply say, "Thy will be," in done. And so the turnaround began, not with fireworks, not with big signs, but with a broken man kneeling in silence and with God at his side. But what would come after that, Andre never imagined, because when we truly deliver, the sky begins to move invisibly. And it was at this exact point, in this new place of surrender and vulnerability, that the miracle began to be created, silently, within his heart. The change didn't come overnight, but it started there, that morning when Andre fell to his knees, without strength, without a mask, without pride. The sincere delivery he made in that corner of the room opened a space in the heart for God to begin to heal what had been hurt for a long time. It wasn't just his wife's betrayal. It wasn't just the abandonment he felt. There were deeper, older wounds that he didn't even know he was carrying. And God, with his infinite mercy, began to touch each one of them. Not in a hurry, not with violence, but with love. A love that cleanses, that rebuilds, that gives new life. The following days were still difficult. Andre still faced painful memories, still felt the weight of rejection, still needed to deal with the absence of his wife, who had decided to leave home after the confrontation they had, shortly after that morning. But something inside him was different. He no longer looked at the situation with eyes of revolt, but with eyes of hope. God had turned on a light inside him, a small light, but it was enough to guide the next step. He began to read the Bible again, slowly, without rushing, and each verse seemed to have been written especially for him. Psalm 34:18, for example, left a deep impression on him. "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the brokenhearted." He cried reading those words, because that was exactly how he felt, with his heart in pieces. But now he knew he wasn't alone in these pieces. God was together, collecting one by one. He started attending church again, even though it was difficult at first. I felt ashamed, afraid of judgment. But there, in that environment where he was previously known as an example of a husband and father, he now returned as a man undergoing reconstruction. And it was also there that he began to be embraced, not by religious discourses, but by people who knew what pain was, who had their own scars and understood that true faith is not the absence of wounds, but the presence of God even with them open. Over time, Andre began serving in the church again. First in silence, arranging chairs, helping at the reception. Afterwards, someone invited him to speak to a small group of men. He almost refused, but he felt that God wanted him to speak. And that night, when he opened his heart, told his story sincerely, without hiding his pain, without embellishing his suffering, something extraordinary happened. Several men stood up, their eyes full of tears, and confessed that they too had been injured. Some were in the process of separating. Others were dealing with old betrayals. Others carried hurts that were never dealt with. There, in that simple circle, without lights, without a stage, Andre understood that his wound had now become a testimony. He was no longer just someone who had been betrayed. He was someone who had been restored, not because everything worked out perfectly, but because he had let God in where before there was only pain. And you know what's most beautiful? Little by little, he began to truly forgive. Not that forgiveness that the mouth says, but the heart still rejects. It was a process. He prayed for her, even far away, even without knowing if they would ever reconcile. He asked God to heal her too, because he understood that her betrayal was not just a wrong choice. It was a reflection of wounds that she herself carried. And when we mature in faith, we learn to look beyond error. We learn to see with the eyes of grace. Once, he met his old friend. It was unexpected, quick, but real. The heart accelerated, the memory came with force, but instead of exploding, Andre took a deep breath, looked him in the eyes and just said, "I forgive you." It wasn't theatrical, it wasn't easy, but it was liberating. Because forgiveness, after all, is not about the other. It's about you, about stopping carrying the weight that prevents you from walking. And the more he forgave, the more he grew stronger. The closer he got to God, the more his identity was restored. He started to smile. Again, he went back to playing with his children. A new professional project started. And most importantly, he dreamed again. Those dreams that had been shelved, suffocated by pain, began to take shape again. But now, they weren't lonely dreams. They were dreams guided by God. And here comes something I want you to pay attention to. When God restores, he doesn't give it back as it was before. He makes it new. He turns pain into purpose, loss into direction, tears into ministry. That's what Andre experienced. The man who once thought about disappearing from the world was now someone who helped others not to give up. He started counseling couples, talking to young people, visiting people who were experiencing family crises. And the most beautiful thing is that he did this not with a tone of judgment but with compassion, because only those who have had their souls hurt understand the value of empathy, and Andre was now a healing channel. God used his pain as a bridge of reconciliation. If you have already experienced a transformation like this, comment here, "God restored me," because every testimony strengthens someone. And you can be exactly the voice that will rekindle the faith of those who are thinking about giving up now. And do you know what Andre learned in this process? That we don't need to understand everything to trust. That we don't need to have everything figured out to be used by God. And that sometimes the greatest miracle is not the restoration of the marriage, but the restoration of the soul, of self-love, of faith, of identity in Christ. And his story isn't over yet. Because when God begins to write a new page, he goes beyond what we can imagine. But before you see what happened next, you need to understand what was generated from this new heart. Maybe you've watched this story so far with a heavy heart, feeling as if every word was describing your own life. Maybe, like Andre, you also trusted someone with all your heart and were betrayed. Maybe the wound that accompanies you today is not visible to others, but inside you there is a pain that doesn't seem to go away. You try to move on, you try to smile, you try to live as if nothing had happened, but inside you're fighting not to break down. I know, and God knows, and that's precisely why you're here. Nothing is by chance. This story didn't appear on your screen for nothing. This narrative is a seed that the Holy Spirit planted in your heart, because God wants to talk to you. It wants to remind you of something that the world tries to erase every day. You are not alone. And most importantly, you have not been forgotten. You may have been rejected by people, betrayed by those you trusted most, humiliated, ignored, underestimated, but God doesn't do that. He doesn't turn his back. He doesn't lie. He doesn't abandon. On the contrary, it is precisely in these moments when everything seems lost that he approaches in a more intense, quieter, more transformative way. It was like that with Andre, and it may be like that with you. The truth is that God does not need everything to be perfect to act. He doesn't expect you to have all the answers. What he expects is a sincere, available, broken heart. The kind of heart that no longer has the strength to pretend, that can no longer bear the weight of guilt, hurt, fear, a tired heart, but still willing to try one last time, because sometimes it is in the last resort that the miracle begins. And you know, maybe your miracle isn't something external. Don't be an immediate reconciliation or visible response. Perhaps your greatest miracle today is breathe again with hope. Go back to looking at the sky and believing that God still has something for you. Go back to praying, even with your voice choked. To dream again, even after it has been broken. Return to living with faith. And that decision to get up, even with your knees hurt, is the first step. This is how restoration begins, with small but determined steps, with sincere tears but delivered, with simple but profound prayers. God does not demand performances, He just wants the truth. And your truth could be the beginning of a new story. So don't let this word die here. Don't finish this video just as a spectator. Allow this message to become part of your journey. Make it a seed in your heart. And if she spoke to you, if she touched any area of your life, write here in the comments, "This story is mine too." Your comment could be the beginning of liberation for someone reading, feeling the same things you felt. And if deep in your heart you feel that God brought you here for a purpose, do not ignore this call. He wants to rebuild what was destroyed, restore what was injured, pick up what was thrown to the ground. And if you allow it, He will do it. It has already started. So now, with all humility, but with all the boldness of faith, I want to extend an invitation to you. A simple invitation, but one that carries enormous spiritual power. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this message. It may seem like just a digital gesture, but it's much more than that. It's an act of faith. It's like saying, "Lord, keep talking to me." It's like declaring, this message needs to reach other hearts. Because just as Andre had his life transformed, there are thousands of other people right now waiting for an answer. And your action can now be the channel that God will use. Each video here is more than content. It's an altar, a place where pain becomes testimony, where a fall becomes a new beginning, where the voice of God finds those who need to hear it most. And you can be part of it. You can be an instrument of renewal, of a miracle, of hope. Now imagine the scene, the sun setting outside, a cross in the background, the sky dyed orange, as if the Creator Himself was saying, "I make all things new." And there, in the midst of the peace that only God knows how to give, a truth resonates loudly. God restores what was broken. But this story doesn't end here, because when God starts to transform a life, He doesn't stop halfway. There is still more. There is still purpose. There is still something you need to see, hear, and feel. There is still more to be revealed. And do you know the most incredible thing? What God did in Andre's life was just the beginning. Because when the Lord touches a wounded area, He doesn't just heal the pain, He activates a purpose. And when a restored heart is placed in His hands, heaven begins to move things that no one imagined. In the next video, you will learn what happened when Andre received an unexpected call, something he would never have sought on his own, but which completely transformed the direction of his life. A new mission born of pain, driven by faith, and supported by a God who never wastes any tears. There's something great coming, something that will remind you that the miracle never stops at healing. It continues with the mission. Stay tuned. You are about to witness another chapter that proves that God's best always comes after a fresh start.